Welcome to the Gruber Morning Show. This is the Tesla Roadster podcast version of our Tuesday morning podcast. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good morning and welcome. What an interesting picture in the background there.
You know, I'm fascinated by what AI thinks a Tesla Roadster is, and that's part of the reason I throw this up. It's not to provide an accurate representation of what's inside a Roadster, but it definitely looks high-tech, and there's probably some technology there that it has not reached humanity yet. But do you notice how many seats it has?
I did, and the steering wheel is in the center. What a novel idea.
Yeah, now you caught that. I didn't even see that. That is a novel idea. Of course, if you had a passenger on either side of you, that might work. Yeah. I don't think you could fit them into that car, though.
Yeah, I've seen the seats in the Tesla Roadster, and 2 seats are not very big.
Right.
Putting 3 seats in there, I'm thinking that it's going to be my 2 granddaughters and my daughter who will have to sit in there.
Yeah, you get the right size people in a Tesla Roadster, and you're bumping shoulders, while you're driving.
Yeah.
But we wanted to kind of give you a glimpse for what these Tesla Roadster podcasts are all about. We started these months ago. I think we're up to session number 35 now or something like that. And weren't sure initially that we were going to get enough content for each of these podcasts. But as it turns out, there are news items that occur all throughout the week that we pick up, and it's from a variety of sources. One of them is emails, for example. We have a lot of Roadster activity taking place, and a lot of customers and prospects out there and people in the community, and oftentimes they will email with their concerns, issues, questions, tech support. So that's part of what feeds these podcasts. Then, of course, emails coming in. We always have emails of some type discussing Roadster sales, Roadster problems, updates in the industry. That feeds this podcast. And then finally, we continue to reverse engineer, and as we're finding new issues with Roadsters, and this is most valuable to the community, I think, aging issues, those are things that we share in this podcast.
Yeah, there's been a lot more content than I thought we would end up having as we started this. But part of it, I think, is because it's such a passionate community as well.
Mm-hmm. Right. And there's always stuff going on. Like right now, Bring a Trailer has been selling a Roadster once a week. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but there's a lot of Roadster dumping going on right now. And the latest one on Bring a Trailer is VIN number 1407. And we've got a pretty good handle typically on where the Roadsters are, what VINs they are, who owns them, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. But this one was, we were dark. We did not know about this one. And it's from Los Altos, California. That's all we know at this point in time. And it just goes to show that the Roadster registry out on our website doesn't know all. It knows some, but not all. This car is up to $75,000 at this point. It's doesn't appear to have much of a pedigree. It's a 54,000-mile car. For California, that's not high, though.
Right.
Anywhere else, that people would be concerned. And it looks like a nice, clean, decent, drivable type Roadster, a daily driver. So we'll see how far this gets. Bring a Trailer's track record hasn't been the greatest lately. Remember, you only get like 7 or 8 days to sell the car.
Right.
And right now with the dumping going on, the median prices for a non-pedigreed Roadster like this is about $75,000 to $80,000 on average. So it's sitting there right where it may sell for. We'll see.
Yeah, I know that these have been up and down. You and I were talking this last week about one that popped up into 6 figures, and there was no logical reason why. Two people who had funds decided that they both wanted the car.
Yeah. That Arctic White that just sold, by the way, a beautiful car. Mm-hmm. They removed the yellowing PPF, which is quite normal on an Arctic White Roadster. It was loaded up with carbon fiber. I think the MSRP on it was around $154,000 or something like that, so on the upper end. Mm-hmm. But a beautiful car. It was a 2016 battery pack. A little bit of concern there from some of the people that called us about that pack. But it sold for $135,000.
Wow.
And I think, again, there were a couple of people that wanted that car.
Yeah, I think it was more that there was more than one person who wanted that particular color and style of car.
Yeah. The background story on it, by the way, and I did talk to the seller, the original owner had passed, and he was an avid collector, took extraordinarily good care of his cars, so it was very well preserved.
Okay.
And it wasn't the only car that he had in his collection, but he tended to, again, set very high standards in his collection. We've got some people chiming in. It looks like Mike Maloney is with us from Gold and Silver, and also from Dan. Hi from Dan. Okay.
I think it's Dan that's actually posting. He says, we'll be downloading this one and listening on a long flight.
Ah, okay. Yeah, you guys are traveling a lot these days, I've noticed, and thank you for joining us. Mustava_Main is with us, and he's sending us an emoji that indicates what explosion.
Yeah, it's like the smash that thumb. You know how Crunch Grace Hopper will say?
That's right.
Smash that like. Give us the likes and subscribe. We really appreciate that.
Lord of Lights is saying, fast car, talking about the Roadster, but fastest depreciating car, too. Well, that's temporary, folks. Right now, there's a glut of used Roadsters for sale for a number of reasons. But again, remember, it's the first electric sports car of any consequence. We're not talking about the 1907 Baker taxi cabs in New York or the EV1 at this point. This Tesla Roadster was right at the genesis and set the seed for the EV car revolution. And there is no other car that was as iconic and as instrumental in that process.
Well, it was proof of concept. It was the car that proved that an electric car can be a viable vehicle. And as far as fastest depreciating, yeah, I mean, if you'd have bought these cars in 2018, you'd have paid $30,000 for them.
Yeah.
If you'd have bought them in 2020, you'd have paid $50,000, and in 2021, you'd have paid $110,000.
Mm-hmm.
So, in my opinion, they've gone past the straight line depreciating, always going to become less valuable stage, and they're going up and down. So, these cars will hit a low, but supply dwindles over time. The price is going to eventually go back up as well.
Yeah. You know, what I find interesting, too, without mentioning too many names, is how many Tesla people are interested in buying a Tesla Roadster now.
Yes.
That's also a good indicator. And of course, like you say, with supply and demand, when the supply is too high, well, the demand is affected and the price adjusts.
Yeah.
One of our Swiss cars, by the way, just got notified this morning sold. And so there are sales on our Roadster matchmaking site currently, but typically we find that right now, Bring a Trailer is the place to get a inexpensive Roadster. There's a lot of dumping going on there.
Yeah, basically what we're saying is if you're a seller and want to get the best price, come to us and put your car on the matchmaking service. It might not be quite as fast, but they are still moving, and they're typically moving for higher prices than Bring a Trailer gets.
Oh, I'd be terrified putting a car out there with no reserve.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you may have to buy it back. Lord of Lights also says the Model S and the X don't hold their value either. It doesn't help when Tesla lowers their MSRP. You know, you're right. Yes, the nosedive in the other EVs, the older Tesla EVs, is definitely apparent. But again, my vote is on the Roadster. Really isn't in that league. It is a collectible car, and we'll continue to go that direction.
All of them are collectible?
No, the
Roadster.
the
Roadsters.
I mean, all Roadsters are collectible?
Yes. I think eventually the distinction between signature car, founder's car, engineering prototype, the last few sold, the final five, those are the ones that will attract the serious collector right now, and all bets are off what you're going to fetch for that car. Do you remember our 38-mile Roadster?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's an example. It was a price, I can't even tell you what it sold for, but it was definitely better than anything that is currently being done on Bring a Trailer.
Yeah, it went for the a good high price. The three Chinese Roadsters went for a good high price. and the collectors don't want us to disclose what those prices are, but your serious collectors are not worried about the marketplace. And the cars that, if you're driving them to use them, how much does it matter what the car is worth on the open market unless you're about to sell it?
Mhm.
It's almost like a house, not quite, but not far from.
Sure.
Your car value is what you get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's why the person who has the quote unquote junker that's worth $1,500, they drive it and continue driving it for years, and they'll put $2,000 into it, knowing that, yeah, okay, it doesn't increase the value of the car, but that car is valuable to me.
Sure.
And I want to keep it.
Another indication for us, at least, since we work on so many Roadsters, is the kind of improvements that the owners are starting to put in the cars, especially for the immediate collectible signature cars, for example.
Mm-hmm.
People are no longer concerned about putting some serious money into the restoration of these cars.
Right.
Things like upholstering the seats. And I think they're preparing for these cars to continue to go collectible and become more important in their own personal collection.
Yeah, I think so as well. Lord of Lights has another comment for us. He says, a Taycan sold yesterday on Bring a Trailer, 25K miles. It lost $100,000 from the new MSRP.
Wow.
But
Wow.
that's not really apples and oranges, though, to the Tesla Roadster. I mean, the Roadster was, arguably kicked off the EV revolution. Porsche Taycan just followed.
I think what we're talking about here might be the broader implications of a whole bunch of things coming together. The unrest in the world right now. Some people are calling it the beginnings of World War III.
Yeah.
Inflationary concerns. The joblessness, where we place ads these days and we get inundated with applicants.
Yeah.
A year or two ago, you guys used to have to spend all kinds of major money to try to get people to even send in their resumes.
Yeah, people would send in their resumes, and and their demands were, I want to work from home 3 days a week, and the fourth day I'll come in, but it's only going to be a 6-hour day. And
do you have, what is your sign-in or your sign-on bonus?
Yeah, and what's your signing bonus? And there's, to me, I think too, the politicization of electric vehicles overall. We were reading a comment in our last podcast earlier this morning. The guy talking about EVs are a farce and they're a tool of wokeness.
Mm-hmm.
Why does the energy source for your car have anything to do with political bent, conservative or progressive? It's meaningless. Yeah. It's like saying somebody who owns a diesel must be a Republican because it's a diesel.
Right. Now, again, I point back to the fact that we now have smart money coming in, and they're taking certain Roadsters off the market.
Yeah.
And that's a good sign. That's an early indication that we're going to get back on track here. In the meantime, let's let BAT dump some Roadsters. And for those of you buying, looking for a daily driver, this is the time to get serious and keep an eye on that auction site.
It is. I do like Lord of Fly's most recent comment where he says, I find that electric cars depreciate quicker than ICE cars. Don't get me wrong. I own an S, an X, my daughter has a Y, and I have a deposit on 2 Cybertrucks. And he says the vehicles are great, and I understand where he's coming from. There's a lot of unknowns,
mm-hmm.
and unknowns equate to money. It's not just an insurance.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know how something happens, or you're reading the press and saying, "Oh my gosh, if I go to Chicago, I'll never be able to drive my Tesla again because it's going to freeze to the charger." A lot of emotions are behind this, and as people get educated, that risk will go down, and then the change in depreciation stuff will go back up.
We might as well talk and open that topic. the Roadster sales right now being dumped. I
Yeah.
don't think it's an indication of the broader EV market decline, which is being discussed here.
I don't think it is.
I can give you the reasons why many of them are being sold because we're at the forefront of that with our Tesla Roadster matchmaking site. When people come to us to sell a car, we always ask for a backstory. Tell us what's going on. How long have you owned it? Why are you selling it? Those kinds of things. Sad to say, but oftentimes the widows are selling these cars.
Mm-hmm.
And let's not forget that people that would have bought a car from a company that was inches from bankruptcy, a novelty car in 2008, were typically people that had some disposable income. And that wasn't going to be your 20-year-olds.
Right.
It's going to be people that have built a career, most likely retired, and now 15 years later, the obvious is beginning to occur. The other reason that we often get, and it's more times than not, physical limitations. To get in and out of a Tesla Roadster is not that easy. People that have had back surgeries, forget it. You can't get in and out of a Tesla Roadster. Knee surgeries is another one.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, we have other health issues. Then finally, you have a battery pack increase, a price increase. It used to be that people choked on a $30,000 battery pack replacement for a Tesla Roadster, especially when they were only selling for $40,000.
Right.
Then they went up, and I think our matchmaking site had a lot to do with that because they went up within a year to about $120,000, $130,000 asking prices, and many people were getting that. Now that $30,000 proportionately wasn't that big a blow. But most recently, the prices have pulled back somewhat, about 25, 30%. Mm-hmm. And the cost of the battery went up to $40,000. Now that's $40,000 before taxes.
Right.
So you got to put $45,000 in that car, and that's in the United States. You try to ship one over to Europe, that price just went up another 25%. So those are the reasons that the Tesla Roadsters currently are, there is more supply than there is demand.
I'm sure that you're so on point with that. Exactly right. I would bet that this car on Bring a Trailer, it's an original owner car with about 55,000 miles over 15 years. That tells you a couple of things. First, your owner had enough money when he or she bought this car to be able to lose $120,000 and have it not affect them.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what you have to think of with these cars. Now it's a one-owner car, so they have spent time and loved this car, but 55,000 miles in 16 years equates to about 6,000 miles a year, 5,000 miles a year or so, maybe a little bit less. That means it's their weekend to get out of town and go have a fun drive car. That also speaks to somebody who is older and probably has some wealth. I would not be at all surprised if it is either a widow or somebody who is unable physically to get into the car anymore.
And it wasn't a family car. I mean, you can't go on vacation with a Tesla Roadster and take the wife, kids, and dogs.
Right.
And Pete,
Yeah.
one other thing too, just what you mentioned earlier about the overall EV decline, the Roadsters are insulated from that. The article I was reading was saying that the S, the X, the Y, the 3, those are all still in production. As Tesla is lowering that MSRP, like kind of like Lord of Light was saying, you can't sell a $30,000 used Model 3 on Carvana if it's $33,000 to get a new one.
For a brand new one.
So
Good point.
that issue isn't happening with Roadsters because they're not in production, right? So
That is correct, yes.
Yeah. Lord of Lights is commenting too on this. He says that the average buyer of a Roadster would be in the 30 to 50-year-old range. For example, my son's Porsche GT3 has 6,000 miles on it. It needed $1,500 of maintenance on it. A Tesla would never need that unless the tires are bald.
Right. He says also, I love your Instagrams. You're very knowledgeable. Thank you. Those are the
Thank you.
shorts that you're probably referring to. And you know, the social media monster is something that you have to feed every day.
Yeah.
And part of that is we walk around and just grab things that are occurring and do a quick discussion about what's going on. And people find it fascinating. We bring them into our production processes, into our service processes, and we show them what's actually being worked on and what fails on these cars and what kind of improvements customers have. So that kind of is a segue into the next topic. And this one came from an email from a customer. And it reads like this. I was out of state for a couple of months and came home to errors on my 2008 Tesla Roadster with a 3.0 2018 battery upgrade. My heater also doesn't work. It was sitting outside in the rain. Pretty mild climate here in Washington State, but wet. All right. The first thing that I want to go on record again with is Tesla Roadsters are not waterproof. They are highly sensitive in certain areas to water ingress. And I'm going to outline some of those for you. Let's bring up image number 1, charge port door, Jesse. Don't think I have a circuit board here. But on a Tesla Roadster, behind the driver's seat, on the outside, of course, is a charge port door, which was actually a remnant of the Lotus Elise gas cap or gas entry. And it was converted to a charge plug. The design is not stellar. That little LED light ring that you see there has gaps on both sides of it. And what's behind that is a circuit board that has LEDs on it. And as rain travels down, and there's a slope there from the top, it will get behind that door, because if you notice, there's no tight seal on the large circular surface area. There is on the charge plug. And those also get twisted sometimes and don't really, but we don't find problems there typically. But when water gets down into that circular cavity, it eventually migrates down into the circuit board or onto the circuit board, which has a dust cover on the back on the connector. And what happens as that fills up with water, you have a constant voltage on that socket, and it starts electrolysis, which is what naturally happens when you get water, somewhat conductive water, because it has impurities. It begins to plate. It does metal plating, and it moves things around. We've seen chips that were completely corroded off. There's a TVSS chip back there, transient voltage surge suppressor chip. And that will corrode completely off. We've seen pins on the socket that eventually corroded so badly there was no copper left. So, again, if you leave your Roadster out in the rain, that's one part that can fail. Now, this isn't going to kill the car. What it's going to do when you get a bad LED light ring circuit board, you won't see your LEDs anymore.
Right. So you won't know if it's charging or not, or you'll have to go in and check inside the car.
Right.
And this picture's a little dark. If I remember right, that slopes, there's a slope in that charge area, and it slopes inward toward the circuit board. The slope is down. So when water gets in there, it stays. It doesn't get in there and drain off.
It does. It actually stays encapsulated. One of the things that we do, by the way, is we weatherproof this charge port, especially when we do a repair. And what we do then is we replace the components that are defective. And by the way, this particular part is no longer in production. So again, our skills in reverse engineering and repairing a circuit board are vital in this case.
Right.
But as a final retrofit, what we do is we take that plastic cover that was holding the water previously, and we inject silicone into that to create a block for any type of water in the future and completely waterproof that. So it's like a potting compound, essentially, that gets injected into that board, so you won't have this problem in the future.
Sure.
All right, let's bring up another image. And this is the BMB cover. Let's do that one. In a Tesla Roadster, your 1,000-pound battery pack sits from the rear seat back to the power electronics module, or the trunk portion. And there is a part that covers up what are called the battery management board slots. And there you see it's a piece of aluminum angle that's sitting off. In fact, let me point to it. There we go. That's hard to do, by the way. Right where this hand is. All right. That part actually has, or is supposed to have, a urethane seal, so that when it covers the portion of the back of the ESS pack where you see those little slots, water cannot get down inside the ESS pack. Now, the reason for those 11 slots, by the way, is you have circuit boards that are called BMB boards, battery management boards. There's one in each one of these cavities. The sheet now goes to the front of the battery pack, the battery sheet. And down in the bottom of that ESS pack is what's called an immersion strip. There's another picture there. If we can bring up BMB immersion sensor. And this is right out of the Tesla documentation. And here you'll be able to see that immersion strip down at the bottom, which is there to detect water ingress. Now remember, the Tesla Roadster battery pack is one of the safest battery packs in the world, because when Martin Eberhard and team designed that, they had no idea how these things were going to be used, what would happen if you got in an accident, if you drove it into a lake. So they went overboard, admittedly, in creating safety features. And one of those is that immersion sensor, which is that little thing on the left there, that little blue or green thing that runs around the bottom of the pack. As soon as that senses water, it opens up what's called the HVIL loop, or the high voltage interlock loop, and it shuts down the car and creates these types of errors. The way the water gets in there, of course, is through the top. Now, this had a battery replacement in 2018.
Right.
It's possible that when that piece of angle iron or angle aluminum actually was put back on, either it wasn't sealed, it wasn't properly sealed, or with age it eventually breached the seal.
Sure.
And water got down inside the pack. So there's another place where the Roadster is not waterproof. Any of you that want to see proof of this, if you take your Roadster through a car wash and then open your trunk, invariably you're going to see some water laying on top of the battery pack. And that's in picture number 1, B&B cover. So that's another area that you need to pay attention to, and a good reason for not leaving your car out in the rain.
Well, this reminds me a little bit of the Model S as well. We've talked about design issues with that, where the condenser hose on the air conditioning feeds right out onto the battery pack. And if that battery pack isn't perfectly sealed, and even from the factory it's not always perfectly sealed, water starts to get inside the pack, and then you get all kinds of problems.
Or it was perfectly sealed, but they're using a steel cover with steel bolts, and you have water sitting in those grooves.
Right.
And eventually it just rusts to the point
the
where
water
you now
can start
have,
getting in.
Exactly, yes.
And so this is I was thinking this person is probably in Western Washington, because Eastern Washington is what's called a high desert. Very little, comparably, very little rain. The Cascade Mountains run north and south along the coast. And so it says pretty mild climate, but in Washington State, but wet. Well, that to me says he's probably in Seattle. And in Seattle, the saying that I have heard from friends who have lived there and from people is, you tell the weather by Mount Rainier.
Okay.
If you can see Mount Rainier, it's about to rain.
Really? Okay.
Yes. And if you cannot see Mount Rainier, it's raining.
Okay.
That's the weather.
All right. So another area where you can have water issues in your Tesla Roadster. Let's bring up the picture 1 HVAC controller. Now, what we're going to show here is, and it's not on that AI-generated image, by the way. It looks like it's got some fuel cells there or something.
It's got something up there, that's for sure. I'm not sure.
In the 2.0 Roadster, this HVAC controller we're about to show you is a device inside an aluminum enclosure with high voltage connectors. And high voltage is orange, and The rest of the low voltage stuff will be other colors, black, whatever. But those high voltage connectors there, that's an indication that you have 400 volts inside that little box. You also have 12 volts inside that little box. And when water gets in there, it is going to send voltages into the 12-volt system.
Oh, okay.
And of course, all the devices that are on that 12-volt daisy chain are going to be very unhappy seeing 400 volts, even at low current.
Oh, sure.
And of course, you have discrete components inside this little box, meaning chips and transistors, MOSFETs, diodes, resistors, capacitors. The reason water gets in here, it's a crappy design from the get-go. There's a gasket there. Do you see that little black thing behind the orange connectors? That is a rubber gasket. And we all know what happens to rubber gaskets as they age. They compress, first of all. They may be good for a few years. And as they continue to compress, eventually you have gaps. And now the water can get in through those gaps. One of the things we do is we replace the gaskets. We seal the gaskets. And the other part, and you can't see it from here very well, in between those two Yazaki connectors is a little red LED. It's about 1/8 of an inch in diameter.
Okay.
It's a cool feature. When that's on, that means your 400-volt HVIL loop is healthy.
Sure.
But they didn't seal that little LED so that water can't get past the LED inside the box. And it typically doesn't happen the first year the Roadster's released, but as things age and the gaskets compress and, the LED, eventually water gets into that little HVAC controller. And when that happens, there aren't many solutions other than repair, like we do, going in and actually replacing the discrete components that have suffered some form of catastrophic damage. So that's another area, and that's directly underneath or by the windshield there, by the windshield wiper. You can see that. And the reason water gets in there is you have hood vanes toward the front, and then in the back, it's not quite sealed. So you get a good driving rain splashing on the windshield. It's going to get down onto that HVAC controller.
Well, and am I right to think that on either side of that base of that windshield wiper, there look like basically drainage ports for the water that's being wiped off the windshield to drain down into that engine area?
Yes, that's exactly what that is. It's a trough, basically. It's a gutter.
It's a gutter, and the downspout for the gutter goes onto the HVAC controller, or just about.
It doesn't. Actually, that part is pretty well sealed, but there's a lower spot there because that's where the wiper motor arm exits.
Okay, sure.
So I suppose that if you had water in there after a rain and you were driving and you did a quick stop, the water could splash down into that area.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Jesse. That does help. Yeah, the water could splash down that area, and it is what it is. The engineers thought of a million things, but there were 1,000,010 that they needed to think of.
And then even with the later generation cars, like you mentioned, with all the experience they had with the Roadster and then the development of the Model S, that drain hose was an obvious oversight.
Yes, it was.
There's also a boot that's on the back of the Model S battery pack, which covers both the high voltage connections, high amperage, high voltage, and the CAN signals. Well, again, a rubber boot with age, heat, water, all of that will eventually become brittle and deteriorate. And some of the reasons for water getting inside the high voltage battery packs on a Model S is because the boot was compromised at some point. Now, Tesla, of course, repairs all this. Once they recognize the problem, they retrofit, they replace, they may even have a recall. But you can't discover everything in your initial testing.
Right. Because some things, like these things that wear over time, it's impossible to know. You test it for a year, it's good after a year, it doesn't fail until 3.
Or you have a vendor problem. Maybe the quality of the rubber was not high enough to where it remains subtle and, seals properly.
Yeah, good point.
That's exactly what happened to the Roadster power electronics module with the IGBT insulating material. Tesla had no idea, nor did Chroma, that in 5, 10, 15 years, this stuff was going to crumble, get dry, and deteriorate in short transistors.
Right, exactly.
Had they known that, they would certainly have avoided that particular
I'm
product.
sure they would have.
Real quick, guys, we just got a message from Lord of Light. It says, my destination is 1 mile away. I say goodbye. He has another message up there, too, if you want to read that.
Okay. Let's do that real quick.
Yeah, he says, I've been watching and texting you while driving my Model S Plaid on autopilot. I love that feature. General Motors tries to copy, but theirs doesn't hold a candle to Tesla's. I've also been watching and texting you while Elon has been driving my Model S Plaid for me.
Okay, excellent. Thanks for joining us, by the way, Lord of Lights. Yeah. See you next time. So the fourth one that we want to bring up here is the 1- condenser. And again, what we're talking about here is, why is a Tesla Roadster not waterproof, and why is it not recommended to store that beast outside, especially if you live in an area where you get rainfall?
Mm-hmm.
The guys in the UK have the biggest problem with this. Not in Phoenix, Arizona, but what you're seeing there is a couple of Spall fans on top of a condenser, aluminum condenser assembly for the HVAC system. And toward the bottom there, you can see a little bit of what looks like leaves or pine cone needles.
Yeah.
All right. In areas where you have a lot of tree activity and 4 seasons, and the leaves fall every year, leaves will fall down into this cavity on a Tesla Roadster because you have your 3 hood vanes, and they're big slats, about 1 inch gap, and leaves will congregate and pile up on your condenser. Now, it's not a good idea to leave the leaves there because it also affects airflow. But the primary reason, if you live in a wet climate, leaves, once they get wet and continue to stay wet, become acidic. And what you have is thin aluminum fins on that condenser. And in the UK, it's not uncommon to end up with HVAC leaks in the condenser assembly because the leaves, the acidic leaves, have actually eaten through the aluminum.
That totally makes sense. And yet the condenser and the hood vanes were probably put there on purpose, not with the thought that what's happening when it's not running, but with the thought of what's happening when it is.
When it's cooling.
The condenser needs to be able to actively cool and get that air out from underneath that hood. Otherwise, you're going to have cooling issues because the area under the hood will just get hotter and hotter and hotter. There's nowhere for the air to go.
Right. Now, fortunately, in this case, we were able to reactivate an old vendor that makes these condenser assemblies, and we have them in inventory, and Tesla buys them from us as well. So when you do need one of these replaced, it's not like some of those electronics, which are no longer in production, and you have to hunt and fish or get a company like us to repair it on a component level. So those are the 4 main areas that are a problem for Tesla Roadsters in wet climates.
And when the, you and I were talking about before the show, I'm going to go and I'm going to spend $70,000 on a used car. And I'm gonna leave the area for a couple of months. Whether it's on business, whether it's on pleasure, it doesn't matter. If I'm going to spend this much money on a car, possibly if I know that these are potential issues, but even if I don't, spend $100 and get a car cover.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Yeah,
that's cheap insurance. If you don't have the ability to garage the car, just go ahead and get a car cover and help protect it from the elements.
And there's another reason to be careful about leaving Roadsters stored outside, and that's rodent damage.
Mm-hmm.
We're beginning to see a lot of rodent activity. In fact, we have 2 of them in the shop right now. We had 5 when we had the Chinese Roadsters in the shop. Those left, by the way, they're up in Oregon now, and they are sold, and But anyway, rodent damage, it can be a problem for a Tesla Roadster. I'm not sure why they prefer and like the coaxial cable in the Tesla Roadster, but someone was saying that it may be soy-based insulation,
Yeah.
edible. And they don't just confine themselves to, the wire insulation they find tasty. They'll also chew into your seat belts, which are extremely tough if you think about it. That's a nylon weave type fabric that's designed to, hold a body back during a collision. They'll chew into that. They'll chew into rubber. And the reason they do that is not because it's edible and they find it digestible. It's because they're building nests inside your car and they need soft material for their embryos and offspring.
Right. And the Tesla Roadster, unfortunately, tends to have a lot of really nice mouse-sized nooks and crannies
Right.
where they can build nests that are not visible and not easy for other animals to get into.
Right. The cavity, the running board cavities are their favorite spots because, like you said, a cat's going to have a hard time getting in there to make a meal of the rodent.
Right.
So they find that quite useful. But so that's our suggestion. So something else that I have for you is we had a Swiss car that just got notified this morning that sold. Have a picture of that. Let's bring up VIN 384, guys. And this is a Radiant Red Roadster. It was in Switzerland. And you can tell from the background there, well, it's a little cut off on top, but it looks like there's some Alps in the background. Of course, all of Switzerland is beautiful like this.
Oh, yeah.
But the asking on this was $93,000. We don't know what the final negotiated price was. Our Roadster matchmaking site typically does not get involved in the financial transactions other than if we have an escrow request.
That's right.
Which is, by the way, a free service that we offer as well for those that want some extra protection regarding the financial transaction. But again, a beautiful Roadster that exchanged hands in Switzerland, and somebody I'm sure is going to enjoy this on those beautiful roads. All right, let's see what else we've got here. So I found some of the original battery pack architecture data, and I thought that might be interesting to the Tesla Roadster owners. The original brick architecture was each cell was 4 volts, 2.3 amp hour approximately. The new ones are around 3.2 amp hour. That means how much energy that 18650 cell can actually hold.
Mm-hmm.
There's 69 cells connected in parallel to form a brick. There are 99 bricks. And one brick, since they're all connected in parallel, is 4 volts. If you connected 69 cells in series, you would multiply 69 times 4 volts and come up with a voltage. It turns out that a brick is approximately 157 amps. That's quite a bit of amperage, actually.
Yes.
And a brick is not that large. In a sheet, 69 cells are about that much by about that thick. So you've got 157 amps in that package. There are 621 cells in a sheet, 11 sheets, and 9 bricks connected in that sheet. Each sheet voltage is 36 volts. Again, they got that wrong. I just found a typo in there. They're talking about the sheet and the brick is the same amperage. It's not. There are 11 sheets connected in series, and it's 396 volts for the 11 sheets, all in series. So that's the string voltage, what we call it,
Right.
critical power.
Right.
The total cell count in a Tesla Roadster battery pack is 6,831. 99 bricks connected in parallel, 69 cells connected in parallel, 11 sheets, and approximately 396 volts. The original packs were 56 kW per hour, and the new packs, the 3.0 packs, are 80 kW per hour.
So those that's about a 30 between 30 and 40% increase
Mm-hmm.
for the new R80 packs. I find this to be just fascinating stuff. Just to, I've got the image of at my home, we have this little battery holder, and you can see all the AA batteries, right? We had to replace them this weekend, and I'm thinking, okay, so I could take those 50 or so AA batteries and just continue to stack them up on my kitchen counter, and we could end up with, you put them, block them together in parallel, and then block the parallel pieces in series, and boom, the next thing you know, you've got this massive battery that's super high voltage, super high amperage, and they've all been made out of AA batteries.
You could do that, yes. And I wonder what amp hours you would end up with if you were using WA, because they're nowhere near as energy dense as a lithium ion cell.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah. All right. So the original battery pack numbers are 100% state of charge for one of the legacy battery packs. Again, the 54 kWh pack. In range mode was 245 miles. At 85%, the state of charge, which is standard mode, which is the recommended charge limit, was 185 miles. And what's amazing is Roadsters have been out since 2008. There are Roadsters that are in the 170s, and we've even had some that were in the very low 180 range in standard mode.
I remember you had one that was charging consistently to 183 or 184 miles.
Right.
And that was after repairing a resistive cell.
Right. So it's a testament to the durability of the 18650 multi-cell battery pack design.
By all means.
And, no one at the time that they were developing Roadsters really fully understood what these things would age like. I remember talking to JB, and like 3 years ago or so now, and he thought that it was a 10-year design life for that ESS battery pack in the original Tesla Roadster. And by that time, the car was 13 or 14 years. The 15 to 50% SoC in storage mode is around 40 to 100 miles. All right, storage mode, by the way, is something that we do not recommend. It was a great original design concept that was inserted in the Roadster to help the battery age. But what we're finding is that people using it, going on vacation, the distance between SOC or state of charge to being bricked is very brief, very short. And a number of Roadsters have been bricked as a result because they couldn't get to them in time.
I think of this as one of those really smart engineering ideas that had basically a fatal flaw. The idea of getting a car and just storing it at 25 or 30% charge is great, but they forgot the fact that the car actually siphons off energy from the battery to run all of its internal systems, even when the car is quote unquote off.
Good point. So just to give you an idea of, again, this is from actual repairs that we're doing at Gruber Motor Company, something we ran across that was new to us. We have a Roadster that was blowing 12-volt fuses, and not consistently, but there was a huge drain on the 12-volt bus, and it was throwing certain types of errors that make the APS very unhappy when you have that high a current drain, and occasionally blow the fuse. As it turns out, in the passenger wheel well, there is a power amp for the audio system that delivers 200 amps of audio power to the woofer that's behind the driver's side seat. And that amplifier had gone bad.
200 amps or 200 watts?
Watts. Sorry, 200 audio watts. Thank you for clarifying
You
that.
bet.
So what we ended up doing was taking out that power amp. We finally traced it to that, and it's extremely difficult to get through. The guys had to remove the VMS module, part of the wiring harness, and of course it's basically inaccessible because the passenger footwell in a Tesla Roadster is very small.
Oh, yes.
So we couldn't use just any one of our engineers to go in there. It had to be a certain one that would fit in there. and then dig around in there next to that firewall, and we extracted that audio power amp, the 200-watt power amp, opened it up, and you can usually tell in electronics if something's not right because you get this essence of Allen Bradley, as we call it, which is the odor of a burnt resistor.
Yes.
And it definitely had that perfume that seemed to permeate this box. We opened it up, and sure enough, there was some carnage inside there, and began to realize that this is another one of the electronic modules in a Tesla Roadster that is we're going to have to pay attention to, because it was full of electrolytic capacitors and transistors and MOSFETs and the normal stuff that we end up seeing fail. The first reaction was, well, you can get a higher end or a better power amp to put in there. But since this was a signature car, we're very cautious about doing any kind of modifications like this to collect highly collectible cars because it's all about originality.
Right.
So our vote there was either to do a deep dive component level replacement and repair, or find a replacement in our parts cars that we could use to replace that power amp, which I think is what they're doing now.
Okay.
But yeah, there would definitely be some better product available. It was even a little bit smaller than the power amp that was there. But again, out of sight, out of mind, there is some more electronics that is buried in the passenger footwell.
Wow. Okay, my only question for you, and for our audience, they know some of our engineers.
Sure.
Was it Scotty or was it Victor?
It was actually Scotty and Brad, I believe, that did that.
Okay.
Now, Victor would have been a good choice, but yeah, he's typically in the front office.
Yeah, Victor's typically up front, but Scott is, we like to call him Scotty, and he's he's our lead pen builder. He's just a genius on that. But he's a small, thin guy that could fit into the Roadster underneath that wheel well and be able to reach up in there and get stuff.
We had a customer a while back that, of course, had children, and she ended up leaving one of her toddler's shirts in the shop area, and one of the guys picked it up. He says, "Hey, did Victor lose his shirt?" So we like to mess with Victor. All right, got another picture. Oh, we've got Van Goatwagen joining us. Hello, Gruber team.
Hi,
Thanks.
Van Goat.
Yep. Can we bring up picture of a, well, I don't have it here. Suntron Charger. Okay, I guess, let me see if my...
Oh, there it is.
There it is, yeah. Suntron Charger, Jesse. In the world of Tesla Roadsters, there were some experimental chargers that were originally designed and sold. I don't have a picture of it, but one of them was designed by Martin Eberhard. It's a lot smaller than this. Then came this larger wall charger, which is pretty sophisticated. It's the Suntron Charger. And those were eventually replaced with the Clipper Creek wall chargers, the TS-70. Both of this unit and the Clipper Creek are capable of charging up to 70 amps, which reduces your charge time from near depletion to full charge in about 4 hours.
That's impressive.
Very good charger. We have one of these in for repair, and it got repaired, and we found out that it had trouble charging. And did a lot of troubleshooting, only to find that these original Suntron EVSEs, as they call them, will not reliably charge a 2.X Roadster because the tolerance for the acceptable leakage current is very tight, and the leakage currents on 2.0 Roadsters are very high. What they're talking about there is the sensing of current between chassis ground and physical ground. And in a ground fault interrupter circuit, that's what the GFI circuit is looking for, is any kind of voltage, even small voltages between those 2 points, because that indicates that someone's being electrocuted.
Right.
When you've got your hand on a piece of metal or in a sink and you're touching a live wire, that will translate into some leakage current. So anyway, that's what the problem was with this. It wasn't until we hooked the building ground or the outlet ground to the metal enclosure on this charger that we were able to get it to charge 2.0 Roadsters.
Now, why is it that the Roadster 2.0, 2.5 has a high leakage current where the 1.5 does not?
Didn't discover that yet.
We haven't discovered that
Yeah.
yet. Okay.
Yeah. And it has to do with the PEM architecture and the PEM construction, because the PEM in a 1.5 is different than the one in the 2.x Roadsters.
Mhm.
So anyway, if you have one of these and you have it up on your wall and you swap your 1.5 Roadster for a 2.x, or you get an additional Roadster, a 2.x, you're going to have a hard time charging your 2.x Roadster with this wall charger. But for 1.5s, it's a very reliable unit.
Rian Shah has joined us today and says, "Hey, Gruber Motors, I love your guys' content." So thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thanks for joining us. All right, let's see what else we've got here. Let's bring up the picture extension cord. This is an error that you will get on your Tesla Roadster VDS, vehicle display screen. And by the way, I'll bring it next time. The color bands around your error codes have a meaning. And there are, I think, 3 colors, blue, green, yellow. And I think there's white, maybe there's 4. But we'll bring that next time. But anyway, this error, if you're seeing it, is commonly thrown on that VDS screen if you're trying to use an extension cord to charge your Roadster. Now, the only way that you can do that efficiently is with your yellow charge cable, because it's got a 15 amp plug on the end of it. Mm-hmm. Your standard, wall outlet type plug. The rule of thumb is you shouldn't use an extension cord, period. But if you do, the best that you can get away with is a 25-foot or less 10-gauge extension cord. And that's a pretty thick cable. It's about 5/8 of an inch in diameter or so. It's not going to be one of those little orange ones that you get at Home Depot that are like 1/4 of an inch in diameter. Typically, the gauge wire in something like that is going to be about 16 gauge. 14 gauge if you're lucky, but nothing greater than that. And by the way, gauge translates to amperage. 14 gauge is good for 15 amps, 12 gauge is good for 20 amps, and 10 gauge is good for 30 amps. Now, the reason you need 30 amps to feed that 15 amp plug is because you have a voltage drop, especially if you're using near full current. So again, be careful using extension cords, and the car will tell you if you have an extension cord detected, and what it's looking for is a voltage drop. It may also be a sync error, and there's a few other errors that you might see. But extension cords are a no-no with Tesla Roadsters. It needs a full 15 amps. The other thing that you have to look for is, in any residential setting, that outlet that you're using is not going to be dedicated unless you hired an electrician to run from point A to point B. In other words, from your circuit breaker panel, 20 amp circuit breaker, directly to that outlet with nothing else daisy chained, as they call it. Building codes allow up to 6 outlets on a 20 amp circuit. So on the other side of that wall, in your garage on the other side of the wall, you may have a toaster, you may have a space heater, you may have somebody that, is running entertainment electronics, whatever it is. Your Tesla Roadster is going to thrive in a direct connection to the circuit breaker panel, and it doesn't like sharing the voltage and the current with anything else in the house.
So the heaviest duty, I'm actually here looking at Home Depot. Most extension cords are 16 gauge. Mm-hmm. You can get a 10 gauge cord from Home Depot, but they're hard to find. Here's a rigid 10-3 heavy duty indoor outdoor extension cord. It's 50 feet though, but it's $150.
Yeah, they're expensive, and 50 feet already crosses the threshold.
Yeah, and that's already going to be longer than
you
need, than you can afford. So the closest I've seen is a 25-foot It's a 10.3, and sure enough, that cord looks like it's about the size of my thumb or a little bigger. It's $100 for 25 feet.
Yep.
And in this case, it has the 30 amp. It's basically an RV cord in that case.
My recommendation, if you have to use an extension cord, go to Amazon. 25-footer, 10 gauge is a must, and you should be able to find those. And I think we paid $80 or something like that.
Yeah.
The other thing is we rebuild your yellow charge cables. The yellow charge cable actually has a 12 gauge cable on it. It's not a 10 gauge, so it's good for 20 amps. And again, that's the reason that if you put an extension cord on it, it has more of a voltage drop. We will actually take your yellow charge cable, take the standard issue cord that comes with it off, and splice in a 10 gauge 25-foot cord. Now you're not going to have any problems, unless your outlet, of course, is daisy chained. All right. Rian Shah says, hey, question. I'm 19, but I have a legacy Tesla Model S. I'm from New Jersey. I have the error BMS_F027, which is for an isolation degradation. Any idea what this could be? I have Toolbox, so I can reset after that fix. You know what I would suggest you do? There is a Facebook site that is called exactly BMS_029, 019 or something like that. I never get it right. Great guy runs it, Ray Johnson. And they have built that out into a repository of technical people that constantly chime in with solutions and workarounds. It's on Facebook. To join is free, but I would suggest posing that question on that site, and they'll give you a lot of useful information.
Yeah, Ray Johnson is definitely a great guy. He feeds information to us on occasion as well, and they would be able to help answer your question in detail on that site at a level that I don't think we'd be able to get to here on the podcast.
Van Goetwagen asks, how long is a charge cord that comes with the Tesla Roadster? The yellow charge cord is 12 feet, and it's oftentimes not enough for the owners that have multi-car garages and are trying to get to an outlet. So that's the other reason that, a 10-gauge extension cord or a retrofit on the cord. And by the way, the other reason to send that yellow charge cord to us, those GFI plugs on the end are only good for about 5 years or so, especially if you have a situation where it's sharing power with another outlet on the other side. It stresses that circuit board. We've taken plenty of them apart, and they just don't last. So that's the other reason to send it to us. We will repair both that plug and get you a better outlet or a better cord. Crunch Grace Hopper, he says, thumbs up, number 4 from Newport Beach, SoCal. Catching up from 50 minutes back. Smash that like button, y'all. Appreciate the shout out.
Thanks, Grace.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here. And, sometime this summer, I'm hoping to take vacation with my wife and family and go to Newport Beach. I'll have to reach out to Crunch and see what kind of local recommendations he might have.
Right. Yeah, it's a beautiful area. We usually go to San Diego, then Del Mar, La Jolla. The kids love seeing the seals.
Oh,
you
yeah.
can get up close and personal there, with the seal population.
Yeah, we're talking about going that way and then maybe spend a day take the ferry over to Catalina Island and just do a day trip over there.
Right.
And I can't wait. It'll be a lot of fun.
Do you remember Chris Labriola?
I do.
He used to go to a dive on the by Pacific Beach. There's a little 2-story motel there. Ancient, old, decrepit, right?
Sure, okay.
But good rates. And the reason it was such a great place was you're like 200 feet from the beach.
Oh,
right by the boardwalk, where they all skate and ride bikes and everything. And you don't spend any time in your room anyway, right?
Right.
So anyway, that's one of our favorite destinations. Those of you interested, they've upgraded in the meantime. They used to have appliances from the 50s, literally in the rooms.
Man.
And shag carpeting, green and orange, right? But they have upgraded since then. It's called the Pacific View Motel. It's right on Emerson there by
I've
the
seen that.
pier, the big long white pier that goes out.
Yes.
Those are expensive, by the way. Those little cottages.
Oh, those cottages are terribly expensive.
But you got a Ralph's across the street if you need groceries, and a lot of restaurants there.
Yeah.
Gordy's, tacos, and you're making me hungry just talking about it. But yeah, great place. Thanks, Crunch. And you know what? We've got other items here for the Tesla Roadster podcast, but we can save it until next week. And really appreciate you guys joining us. If you have any questions after the podcast, feel free to email us at ev@gruber.com. And
then you guys are going to be on tomorrow for the AI podcast at 10 o'clock.
we are.
We've got the Power Hour on Friday at 10. And then you were a guest on the Wired Hour Monday at 10 o'clock this last week.
I was, yes. Yeah, that was just yesterday, actually.
Just
And,
yesterday. So we've got that coming on Mondays. And then we'll be back next Tuesday at 10 o'clock as well.
Thank you for joining us.
Take care.